What we're going to be producing in this lesson is going to be getting some data from the sheet, and I'll show you just different ways that you can work with it, adding in borders, making calculations, updating some of the sheet data, and also creating a chart from the sheet data. So what happened when we ran the script, it added in another column here, total, and it totaled up all of these, added a grand total at the bottom, multiplied the hours by the pay, and created the totals there, and also generated a chart using the data that we had within the spreadsheet. And this is all done with AppScript, and I'll coming up in this lesson. Let's go ahead and select some content from our Google Sheet. We're going to be using a bound script. So we've got a number of sheets within this main spreadsheet that we can use some of the information that's contained within here and then add that into our Google Apps script. So this is a bound script, and the difference between the bound script and a standalone script is that the bound does have a few additional options, and also the way to access the content from a bound script is go under extensions, app script, and that's going to open up the bound script editor. The standalone script is on its own, connecting to the spreadsheets. So we've got a few different operations that we'll try out. So let's update this and set the, we'll call it the formatSheet data function. So give the function a name that we're creating. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to select the sheet that we're using. And once again, because this is a bound script, we can use the Spreadsheet app and then get the active sheet. So whatever the active sheet is. And this means that the sheet needs to be selected in the open sheet object in order to be able to select that sheet value. And then let's get the data from the sheet. So selecting the sheet, get the data range, select all the block of data that's available within the sheet, and then using get values puts it within an array. And if we do a log of the data, then we can output that information. So once we run this, it's going to select whatever the active sheet is. So that's the data from the active sheet. And the active sheet is going to be whatever we've got the first item within the sheets. So if we were to move that one over, we get a different active sheet. And this is whatever the open sheet is that we're using and that we've bound the script to. We can also select the sheet by its name, or we can select it from the sheets array. So depending on how we want to select it, make the selection, that's how we can get the sheet values. And we can also get the active spreadsheet. And then from the active spreadsheet, we can get sheet by name, or we can get sheet by ID, or we can just get all of the sheets array. And then if we want to select the first one that's within the array, we can use that array format. So that will once again select the sheet. And let's say we wanted to select the third one in, so this data one. We would update the index value for the sheet object using the zero-based array index, and this will then return back the sheet that we're looking at here. So it'd be 0, 1, 2, but if these sheet orders change, that's also going to change which sheet that we're selecting. So the most accurate is usually going by name, where you're selecting the sheet by name, but there are a number of other ways to make the sheet selection. So I'm going to keep it at using the index value for the sheet selection, and then we can make some updates to it as we go through the code. So we want to select the header of the sheet. So this is the sheet that we're currently on. And I'll update the data there just to be regular font size, so it doesn't stand out from the rest of the font. And actually, let's do that for this one here. So that's the header within data, and the data array is going to be the one that, or data sheet is going to be the second item, so with an index value of 1. So selecting from the sheet itself, we want to get the header range, which is just going to be the first row from the sheet. So we can select the sheet. We don't need to use the get data range if it's only one row that we're trying to get, or a particular block that we're trying to get. We can get the range itself, starting at row 1, column 1, and then the number of rows that we want to get, and then the number of columns that we want to get. So let's select the data and the first row. And then in order to determine how many columns there are, we can select the data range that way. So that's the heading range. And then once we've got the header range, then we can do things where we can set the font color and the font weight. There's a lot of different options here. Font style. So let's go ahead and we're going to select the font weight and set that to be bold. So run that, and then that's bolding the font. And there's also some other options here that we could set. So we could set the font, and this is going to be as a point size. So this is expecting a numeric value within the cell. So let's set the font size to be 20. So that updated the font size and also bolded it once again. So you've got some options there that you can set those values. Let's also add a border to the cells, to all of the cells. And then you need to once again select the range that you want to use. So this is going to be a border range. Using the sheet, we want to get the range, and the range that we're selecting starting at 1, 1. And then the data, so this is the number of rows. So the data array is going to have a length of the number of rows. So this is going to give us the idea of the block that we want to set. You can also just enter in a numeric value. And then also, because we want to select all of them, we want to have the whole block of content there. So that's selecting that whole range. And then for the border range, it actually has quite a lot of properties when we're setting the border. So it's the set border method. And the first one is going to be if we want a border on top, and we do, so set on top. The next one is to the left. So if we don't want a border there, we can do false. If we don't want one on the bottom, we can do false. And if we want one on the right, we can do true. So there's also vertical and horizontal options. So just set those to be false. So we don't want the horizontal and vertical options. You also have an option for color. So if you wanted a red border, you can set it red. And then there's also the different types of borders. So these are all comma separated. And the types of border is going to be within the Spreadsheet app service. And we could select the border style. And then from there you could select the type of border. So let's just do a dashed border. And save that. And we're going to run that. So it's going to set all of these values again. And we'll see what kind of border. So there's our border. We've got the border there. It's a dashed red border on the right hand side. So a value of true for the horizontal and the vertical. For the vertical, that means that vertical borders. And we set those both to true, to false. So let's update those to true. And I'll update this as well to be blue. I'll see what the difference is. So we run that. Now we've got the borders for all of them within the horizontal and vertical. So it's setting all of those borders as the blue one-pick borders. And then depending on what you want to set, you can also set these as null. So what a null will do is it just won't do any change. So if there's a border there, then it's not going to make any updates or any changes to the existing border content. So once again, set that to green, and we'll run it. And there's our border. So you can slightly see that it is green there, and it's not updating the existing ones. And then as for styles, so let's do a solid thick style for that. So it's a little bit more visible. So it's not doing the vertical, but it is only doing the horizontal, and it's leaving the vertical intact with the null. So that's how you can set the border values, the border range, selecting the border range and then doing the border styles. If we want to add some values together, and let's actually set this to be black, and we'll update all the borders, and I'll make it a little bit thinner because the thick border is a little bit hard to see. So we'll just do a dotted border for those. So that's updating it to be a dotted border. So it's the data is a little bit easier to read. And then you can also update whatever border that you want. So let's say we want to add the numbers together. So we've got the hours and the days. For whatever reason, we want to add those together. So we can do that as well, where we can get the values and then select the range in order to make updates to it. And then we can also set values and colors for the range content. So let's select that, and doing a for loop for the, and let's select I to 0, and we're going to set it at 1 because that's going to be our starting index value within the data array where we've got the values, so we don't have to make any updates to that. And then looping through while it's less than the data length, so that will include all of the rows of content. And as we loop through, and we want to have a total, so it's going to add all of those values together. So we'll start total at 0. And then we'll do another one for a sum. So we'll start that at 0. And this is going to be for the data length. And actually we can just add those values together as we're iterating through. So it'll be data and whatever we've got the value of I for the index. And if we want to select the contents from the first column, and then select the contents from the second column. Also going to set these to be parse integer to make sure that we are grabbing whatever numeric values, numeric data that we can. So these are just JavaScript methods in order to convert things to numbers. So now we're going to have a sum value, and we can log that out into the log. And I'm also going to be adding to the grand total. We'll add whatever we have, and that will just be adding the sum to it. And output the grand total there. And we'll add a few different rows of data there for the totals. So these are the sums of each one of the rows. So we're just using hours and days. So these can be whatever we want. They can be hours, and then this can be pay. And let's adjust those. So that can be the hours that they're getting paid, and then we want to calculate it a total. So we'll do that all with app script, where we'll add in a new item within the header range. So right up at the top, before we're setting the header details, total range. So we're going to be adding in a new item into there. So within the sheet, we want to get the range, and the range is going to be the 1, 1, 1, 1, and we want to add a value into the fourth column. And let's set a value total. So run it again, and that adds in total. And we need to actually add that total before, so that the get data range includes that value within the data range. So that way the total is made large, and we're ready to add an actual total into it. So here we've got the sum. So let's go ahead and we're going to add the sum as we're iterating through the rows of items. And just as we did over here, we want to get the range. And if we're not using the variable, we don't actually need to set a variable for it. If we're just setting a value into the sheet, then we can do it this way, where we're looping through, and we need to indicate the row that we're using. So this is going to be I plus 1. So our value of I is, because the data is an array, and the rows start at 1. The arrays are 0 based. And then within the fourth, and 1, 1. And then let's add in that total value there. So that will do the sum there as the total. And run through that. So that does all of the totals there. And we can also create a chart as well. So let's use the variable, and we'll just create a chart using a variable chart, or we'll call it my chart. And within the sheet, we want to create a new chart object. And then this is where we can chain together. So that will be the chart type. So set chart type. And the type of charts that we're doing is within the charts object. And this is giving us a list of the different types of charts. So once you press the dot, it's going to give you the chart types. So you can select a chart type here within the charts. And then from the chart type, there's all these different chart types. So let's just do a simple bar chart type. Next, we want to add a range to the chart. So using the sheet object, we want to get the range that we want to add in to the chart. So we get the range, and this is going to be where we've got the data. So coming in from 1, 1, and then doing the data length and 1. So that's going to give us the range for the chart data. And then we can set different options within the chart as well. So the first option, let's go ahead and we're going to add in a title. And within the title, this gives a string value, my data. And let's set a height and width for the chart. So the other option, we could set a width and set it at 500, and then set option, and let's set a height for the chart. So the height for the chart will be 400. And then once we've set everything, we're ready to build the chart object. And then within the sheet, once we've built the chart, we could insert the chart, and that's using the my chart object that we just created. And let's do a quick check that we do want to only get the data that's contained starting at B2 to C7. So we can do it within this type of format as well, where we get the range and doing a string value there for B2 to C7. And then the other thing that we want to do is we want to set the position of where the chart is going to be located. So let's do a position where we're going to anchor it off of 2, and let's do 2 and 0 for the offset and 0 for the other X and Y offsets. And that actually doesn't need the colon. So let's try to run that and see where we end up with the chart. So what this did is this built the chart, and that's where we've added in the chart. So coming at 2, 2. So we've placed the chart actually where we don't want to place it. So let's move it down a little bit more and over. So over to 4 and 6 for the coordinates. So that should put it roughly around, actually I'll update this to 5. So this is just where the chart gets positioned and placed. And that placed the chart there, so it's not covering over our data. But of course the chart is movable, and then we can see that this is the charted information that's coming right from the spreadsheet. So that's how you can chart content from the spreadsheet as well, and inserting the chart. And then the last one that we wanted to add is, let's go ahead and we're going to add that total. So because we're selecting a specific part of the chart, and we're not, it doesn't matter where we're ending up with the chart, we can sit and we can calculate out all of the totals there and add them to the bottom. So this can be done where we're getting the total, and we want to just total whatever this total is going to be. So let's add that in where we need to get the range, and we don't need a variable for this one either. So this is going to be whatever value we have, and the way that we're going to determine what is the next available open row is we're going to take the total for the length, and we're going to add 1 to it. So the data length plus 1 and number 4, and then instead of setting the value, let's set the total. So run that again, and there it's adding in the total into our, and it's also producing a second chart. So you might want to take the chart function out because you don't want to run that multiple times and have multiple charts. So that's how you can do quite a bit with the Google Apps script within your sheet content.